Welcome inside another edition of the Scores Table. Brian Haenchen, Courtney Delks, Josh Sabol, Danny Riego here with you. It's Semistate week, so that's what we're here to talk about. It's Semistate week. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Doing great. Sun shining.
It is. This is great. It's getting to like that March basketball weather, which I love. And what is this? Probably like second fake spring, so the bottom's going to drop out sooner or later. But for now, I'm really soaking it in, which is nice. So we should probably address the elephant in the room. I think Danny and I touched on it, just the two of us on Sunday, but it's probably good to get Josh and Courtney's thoughts on just the picks and the debacle that was. It probably felt worse for me because I picked the entire state and did a terrible job, but you two didn't fare much better, at least I don't think, in 4A.
Well, I hope that we motivated.
Yeah.
I hope we motivate some teams. That's all I'm going to say. So I hope that there's the audience, the people that we picked against, I hope that it just lit a fire underneath you guys and that added like 20 points to your guys' wins.
Yeah, and then for me, I think it just proves that we know absolutely nothing about girls basketball.
Yes.
So listen at your own peril. Okay.
That's the way. That's perfect. Let's dive right into the games. We're going to start the way that we've done this. We're going to start with the lower class and just work our way towards the top. Pause on a few games. We do have interviews. Danny and I met with Caston's coach, Josh Douglas, Linton-Stockton's coach, and then Danville's coach as well for short interviews. We'll play clips here on the show tonight, and then we'll have full interviews online available as soon as this thing finishes airing. Let's get to it. We're going to start off with Union City versus Clinton Central, 10 a.m. game at Frankfort. They actually played during the regular season, this one back in December. Clinton Central won 74-35, but Union City was without Oakley Reichard. She didn't play in the regular season match after averaging 16 points and 6 rebounds last year as a sophomore. Nevertheless, wasn't a great game for Union City. Clinton Central won that one pretty handily. They shot 57% with Sarah Parkinson and Erica Robbins both pouring in 20 points, and Carly Davison had 14 and a big stat line there. Union City's coming off a win over Daleville. Clinton Central beat up on Northfield. Neither game were particularly close. But like I said, having Reichard back for Union City, and then Clinton Central has Parkinson, Erica Robbins, and Carly Davison as well. That's gonna make a big difference there for them. Looking ahead now to the second game, and this is our first one with an interview, but I'm going to let some other people talk before we get to it. That's Caston 22-3 versus Marquette Catholic 22-4. Caston, this is their first ever regional championship, something that Danny and I talked with their coach about yesterday. They beat Bethany Christian 44-29. Marquette Catholic beat up on Morgan Township 54-43. Isabel Scales, Addison Zimpelman are the two leading scorers for Caston. Two names you need to know. And then Madison Douglas, Josh's daughter, she stepped in as a freshman, has really shined as well. Danny, what did you take away from our conversation with Coach Douglas yesterday?
Well, I don't think it's any secret why he's successful. I mean, he's remaining singularly focused, but for this podcast, I don't want to remain singularly focused because I would love to see Clinton Central and Caston, because that would potentially set up Don Helmick versus Josh Douglas. And anytime that comes up, whether you're listening to a telecast or hearing somebody tell a story, I don't know if there was like drama associated with it, but Josh Douglas, the head coach at Caston, was Don Helmick's assistant when he was the head coach at Caston. So if we do get Clinton Central and Caston, there's got to be some people in those communities that are looking ahead. So I think the big thing for both of those teams is going to be, remain focused. Caston remaining focused on Marquette Catholic, and Clinton Central remaining focused at Union City. But I found Josh Douglas very impressive. It was just some of the things that he said. And the last point before I throw it to hear other people's thoughts, that community, there were so many people at that game, and he was revving up the crowd, and they were into it, and they seemed educated. They were cheering at the right time, and really feeding off of that. And as when you get these smaller communities, I think it's really cool to kind of see you're not just playing against the basketball team, you're also playing against the entire community. So I thought that was cool, and I thought Josh kind of leaned into that in his interview.
Yeah, being from a small community, and just being able to go to some of the 4A sectionals and seeing, the crowds that the bigger schools bring. They bring a crowd, but when you go to a 1A or 2A or a 3A game, they bring a crowd because everybody's coming out. The farmers aren't in the field yet, and everybody's getting out there. And so the the small town feel is very evident. The Hoosiers feel at these games, and I'm super excited to see. And I'm excited for those schools that are in these semi-states, just everything that's going on in their hometowns this week leading up to it. It's like a parade's going on. Like everything's decorated. All the elementary kids are fired up. There's stuff going on. Like it's a great time for those schools to be in the semi-state, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think too, if you look at like the numbers, like in this Caston Marquette Catholic matchup, they're very similar. Like they're very similar staggered rankings, very similar strength of schedule, very similar shooting, turnovers. Marquette's got Lania Davis averaging almost 20 a game. And then if you look at Caston, they got two players in Scales and Zippelman, who are also very, very talented in their own right. So the prediction is Caston by 1. So, I mean, this looks like this is going to be, a great matchup, and it's going to come down to the wire.
Yeah, Caston has. So you mentioned Scales and Zippelman, but that's a part of a class that I think has 4 seniors. And I think the 5th starter being Maddie Douglas, Josh's daughter, to kind of round out that starting 5. But there's a lot of experience there. And so don't be fooled the fact that they've never been to a semi-state. Don't let that fool you. As I think there's a lot of big game experience more than we want to lead on, I think. But Maddie Douglas is a freshman, and you guys know me. I love talking about the 27s because they're not supposed to be these impactful people. Like she made a play in the the regional championship game. She seems like a confident kid, and she doesn't seem like fazed by the moment at all. And her dad's her coach, but I think she went on a 5-0 run by herself, including a 3, which extended the lead from 15 to 18 and essentially ended that basketball game. But this kid takes and makes big shots for them. And Josh talked about it on the interview about how it was kind of a process through the season to adjust from father, daughter, player, coach, and all of that. But 4 seniors and an electric freshman. That's a fun team to watch. So turn them on.
5 seniors.
Oh, Courtney,
ahead,
I was asking Courtney. Courtney, do you think that a reason why these 2027s are coming in and they're not fazed by the moment? Like, do you think that has a lot to do with like the training and the AAU and that stuff that they're getting at a younger age? So when they come up as freshmen, like they're not afraid of the big moment.
Absolutely. People always ask me, how do I get more confident? And I tell them, you got to get in the gym and you got to work when no one's watching. And so these 27s that are coming in and they're able to be confident in these games, it's because they've been putting the work in and they've put themselves in a position that they can go into these games and just play fearless because they're prepared. And it's also because they're so experienced from the travel circuit and being put in these big moments, these big games, that they're just not fazed. I think it's awesome that we're seeing more and more and kids are understanding that like confidence comes from you got to put the work in. There's no secret sauce. Put the work in and you'll be confident.
Good stuff. So I'm going to throw to the interview here, come back. I got a couple more nuggets on Marquette Catholic, and then we'll move on to the next game.
We were undefeated for a really long time, and then we kind of stumbled coming in here at the end, losing 2 of 3 actually going into the sectionals. And I think teams were starting to count us out, but now you look back at our 3 losses was, Tri-County, who we got a revenge against in sectionals. And one of the other ones was Bremen, who's also in the semi-state. So, people say, oh, you lost 2 or 3 coming in, but I think we lost 2 or 3 against some really, really good schools too.
I'm curious. Yeah. What was the girls' responses, or what was the girls' response? What was the team's response? Like, did your confidence ever waver? Could you kind of tell that kind of woke them up a little bit?
No. We lost to Carroll on senior night, and that's always been a battle between those 2 schools. The way it's been, that was a very emotional night. And then we had to get on the bus and go play Bremen. And we probably looked, no offense, as bad as we've looked all year trying to play a game of basketball. You know how that is. Some nights you're just emotionally drained, tired. That's what we looked like. And I just walked in the locker room afterwards and I said, girls, I really put it on the seniors. I said, tomorrow starts our new season. The old season's over. I said, nothing was hurt tonight. We accomplished everything we wanted to do. We won our tourney. We won our in-season tourneys. We won our conference. I said, everything is still in front of us, but tomorrow on how we show up at practice determines how we go forward. And I wouldn't be shocked when that Friday happened. We had probably the best practice we'd had in 2 months. So the loss probably helped. It probably refocused and re-energized them. But like I said, they rebounded that next day in practice. And I mean, it's just been one step forward. Every practice since then has just been truly amazing.
How is the balance of, the father-daughter relationship and then the player-coach relationship, and how maybe has your senior class maybe helped with that transition? Because that's a different dynamic for sure.
It is. And I said we struggled there at the beginning of the year because there was times I would yell at her, and I was probably a little bit harder on her. And as I had to remind her, I was just as hard on Zippelman and Scales when they were freshmen too. She's just a freshman amongst seniors. And she would think sometimes when I was yelling at her, it was Dad yelling at her. And I had to tell her, in the game, it's all coach. You might think it's Dad, but it's not. It's all coach. And then I always told her as we're walking away, we get to the weight room, and before we leave, once we hit the pickup, I'm Dad again. And that was some of the advice I've gotten from Coach Stasiak at Winnemac and different people through the area. How to coach your daughter is once you step out of that school, become Dad again. And if she has questions, answer them, but stick to the dad role and leave the coach role at school.
Looking ahead now to Marquette Catholic, what jumps out to you with them? I know they've been kind of rolling through, it seems like, through these first few rounds.
Very athletic, very long. They have a nice point guard, number 4. I don't know all their names yet because I've just started breaking them down really good. Very quick. She plays off 2 feet wonderfully inside. I think she's averaging about 17 and a half a game. She's going to cause some problems for us. She's 5'7". She misses it. She gets back off the ground very quick and goes and gets it and puts it back up. I'd say they're very similar to us defensively. They really like to get after you, and they like to push the ball in tempo when they have the chances. So we got to make sure that we slow them down somehow, or try to slow them down, and limit their transition points, and make it a half court game if we can. Take care of the basketball just like in any other type of game.
That's Caston head coach Josh Douglas. A couple quick notes on Marquette Catholic. The number 4 that he's referencing, this Lania Davis, a sophomore. She's averaging 19 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 steals per game. She's having a fantastic season. That's one to watch. And then something else that jumped out to me when I'm looking at Marquette Catholic, 30.5 rebounds per game, 13 of which come on the offensive end. And they're shooting around 41% and averaging 11 threes per game. So something just to keep an eye on. That'll be a really interesting matchup. Real quickly, as we pause here, some breaking news from Justin Sokeland, friend of the show. Jeff Allen has stepped down as Bedford North Lawrence coach after a phenomenal season, 10-year career, 226-45 with that 4A state championship in 2023. So just some news to pass along there on Jeff Allen at Bedford North Lawrence stepping down.
Yeah, class act, great coach. He's going to be missed in the coaching fraternity for sure.
I think Jeff and his staff there, I just want to congratulate Jeff. I've gotten to know him through the years pretty well. Had the opportunity to coach Jenna Allen and Jory Allen, 2015 high school grad and a 2019 high school grad in Jory. Jory won Miss Basketball. But, we talk about that Bedford North Lawrence dynasty. Damon was there, and he was the head coach when they won the state championship with Dominique McBride and Alexa Bailey and Jenna Allen. But Jeff was on staff with Kurt Godlewski also. So he was right there putting the game plans together. But 10 of those 13 straight sectionals, he was the head coach. Like, he's a big part of why B&L was a dynasty. And I think girls basketball means something different down there. You step onto Damon Bailey Court, and girls like Chloe Spreen, when they're really little, they idolize the players that were on the team. So he was a big part of that. I think he's easily one of the best game coaches in the state. He will be sorely missed. But Jeff, you left a legacy, and I could go on and tell story after story after story, and we'll have plenty of time to do that, and even on this pod. But congratulations, man. And, hopefully retirement treats you well.
WBIW.com is where Justin Sokeland writes for. So if you're looking for full stories, read this. You can find it there. I retweeted on my feed. But yeah, best of luck to Jeff Allen. He's a great guy, and wish him nothing but the best and good health and everything over there. Continuing now with our preview portion of the podcast. I can't talk for being today, guys. It's going to be a long afternoon. Jac-Cen-Del 21-5 versus Lanesville 26-1. This rematch of last year's Semistate was not particularly close, if memory serves. Lanesville still the same team. By the way, Danny, you were right on the pronunciation of Hadley Hadley C's last name from last week.
Crozier.
Yep. 23.6 rebounds for against Bar Eve. Somebody pointed that in the comment section.
Nice.
So that's exciting. And Josh, we're getting comments now.
Nice.
It's also nice.
Yeah, Brian Folks put one, like Kenzie's dad put one up there, like showed up on the feed. It was awesome.
That's
cool.
I'm
figuring this thing out. We got some cool bells and whistles here, guys.
I like it.
Jac-Cen-Del took out Eminence in their regional championship game. Julia Meyer, Kelsey Borgman both had 10 points for them, 8 rebounds for Sophia Sullivan at Jac-Cen-Del. 16 steals as a team for Lanesville in their last game. They're just a defensive menace. They're stacked like they were last year. They have the state championship experience. They just have everything, it seems like, baked into there. But I'm curious, Courtney, for you, how did you keep yourself focused on one game at a time, both as a player and as a coach? How do you go about that process? And Josh, you as well.
I think you just have to keep repeating that phrase in your head as a player, and then as a coach, that has to be in your vocabulary all week, of just one game at a time, and just you have to constantly be repeating that phrase just so it gets into your subconscious, and it's one game at a time. And then, I mean, you just got to repeat it, and it's the matter of fact why we play the game is it's not a chalk up that you move on automatically. You got to show up, you got to do your business, you got to take care of it, you got to stay focused and take it one game at a time.
Yeah, this is a heavyweight matchup right here. I mean, I know Lanesville's favored by 14. Obviously, they're the clear favorite to win, the 1A state championship. I mean, heck, they're a top 30 team in the state, period, regardless of class. And they're loaded. I mean, most of their best players, like we say, Crozier, Allen, a lot of these other girls, they're juniors. So Lanesville, they're going to be good for a while. But on the other side, you have Jac-Cen-Del. Scott Smith is a legend in Southern Indiana. This guy probably has one of the toughest, grittiest, hard-nosed programs in the state, and they're not going to be afraid. They're going to come to play. And I really do think that even though on paper it looks like Lanesville is the clear favorite in this game, I would expect Lanesville to have their handful.
Yeah, I think on one of the previous shows, I called Lanesville zone an amoeba zone. And just to provide some definition to that, like it doesn't have a traditional shape, like a 2-3. It shows you different looks, to use Josh's verbiage or Sabe's verbiage. They're changing their pickup points. They're showing you odd front, even different like fronts, and whether it be even front or odd front. I think the fact that Scott Smith and Jac-Cen-Del played them last year, I think that's going to be a big advantage coming into it, because Sabe and I talked about how it's very difficult to prepare for something without consistent rules and consistent shape. But Lanesville, Hank mentioned that how good they are on the defensive side of things. They're only giving up 36 points per game. Jac-Cen-Del scoring 52 points per game. Something's got to give there. But I think it's just going to be their ability to get quality looks and run good offense against this amoeba-like zone. Because until somebody figures it out, Lanesville's going to stop people, because they are absolutely the favorite in Class A.
And I think we said this on a previous podcast, but like when you watch Lanesville play, this does not look like a 1A team. Like the body types, the athleticism, the length. I mean, this looks like you're watching a 3 or 4A program, and that's a huge advantage for them, in any of these games.
Looking ahead to the final Class A semi-state semifinal, North Central Farmersburg 18-10, Wood Memorial 16-10. I mean, there's no real getting around it. The big task here for Wood Memorial is going to be trying to contain North Central junior Jalen Davidson, who went off in that regional championship game, did most of her damage in the fourth quarter to beat Bethesda Christian. Crazy conversion rate at the free throw line, just a clutch performance from a young lady who's rising fast in the South.
That kid's tough. Jalen Davidson is tough. She can get buckets, and she might even be one of the best individual players in this entire semi-state, North and South in Class A. But I want to point back to something that North Central Farmersburg did. Kyle Nettenrip talked about it, how they ran in the fourth quarter. Farmersburg did a triangle and 2 with 2 on Kenzie Folks. So just without, getting too granular on that, Farmersburg's a team is going to do whatever it takes to win the game, right? So I think that's a clue, but that's a really brave move in a regional championship game to take two defenders and put them on one person. So that was of note, because we set this one up. We set that one up, the regional championship, as Kenzie Folks versus Jalen Davidson, and it lived up. But the one thing that we have to qualify that statement with is Folks had two defenders everywhere she went.
Absolutely. And she went off early in that game too.
Yeah,
Folks
she had like 20
points or something.
Yeah.
20 there, 26 points in the first half. Unbelievable performance. Great career for her. Really fun to see. Jumping up now to Class 2A, and this is one of the matchups that I have circled as one of the best of the day, and that's Fort Wayne Luers 17-6 versus Lapel 23-4. Lapel, we've seen them against Eastern Hancock. At least I have Eastern Hancock, Hamilton Heights. They've also played Pendleton Heights twice. They played a pretty tough schedule. Fort Wayne Luers went out and beat Columbia City in overtime earlier this year. The big thing for Lapel is going to be contending with that size, with the Knights averaging about 35 rebounds a game and 4 blocks a game. So they're a big team there. And then on the other side, like we talked about last weekend, Danny Lapel and just Lania Wills and her development, and just the way that team has come along with everybody a year better, or a year, stronger than they were during last year's run to the state championship game. It's a special Lapel team, a really good Bishop Luers team, and man, that's like a coin flip type of game.
I could see both teams representing the north side of the state at Gainbridge. I absolutely could. But the big one to watch for me in this game is going to be the defensive matchups. When Luers has both Waring and Schenk, who can both occupy the paint, I'm curious to see if newbie matches Lania Wills and Maddie Pointer on the two post players, because then who's going to guard Annika Davis? Annika Davis is a really, really good guard who's been the beneficiary of a lot of teams that will play drop coverage or double down or dig in on those post players. But another concern is going to be, I saw it when I saw Lapel play Eastern Hancock live. Maddie Pointer got in foul trouble. I know Wills, she is involved in every play on the offensive and defensive side. If they do decide to match Wills and Pointer on Schenk and Waring, I wonder if foul trouble becomes a big part of the game flow and a big storyline, because you got to have those kids on the floor. And then, if they do pick up their second and third, what does newbie do? Does he play him or rest him? And that'll be an interesting thing. But contrasting styles, these are two really good basketball teams, guys.
Courtney, I had a question for you as a player. When obviously you knew that you were going to score a lot of points and most of the action was going to be run for you. But how did you want the defensive matchups to go? Like, were you thinking like, okay, I want to guard the best player? Or were you thinking, okay, maybe I'll guard like the second or third best player for a couple quarters, but then the fourth quarter, I want to guard the stud? Because I'm looking at these names here, these points per game, whether it's Schenk, Waring, Willis, Pointer, like these are some really, really good players. And the spread's like 2 points. So I think a lot of times like players and coaches are kind of thinking like, okay, like who do I want to match up against who? Like, I guess my question is, as a player, when you're the leading scorer, when you're the focal point on offense, like how did you want the defensive matchups to go?
Courtney, you're muted.
Oh.
Whoops, my kids were in here earlier. Sorry. I would answer this question differently. A high school game or a college game. So as I'm talking about high school, I would want to be guarding the best player on the other team, because the game is shorter. The games go fast. And so for me personally, I was a really well-conditioned athlete. And so I want to do anything that I can. Put me on the best player. Like, let's just freaking roll. In college is a different type of game where that's a whole nother podcast. You can talk about that stuff. But high school, put me on the best kid, get the ball in my hands. We got games to win. The game's on the line. Like, let's go get it. It's a mentality that you have to have, because you don't want to look back and think, man, what if I guarded that player and was able to make an impact? You got to make that. It's tournament, one game and you're done. You got to go for it.
I knew that was the answer, by the way. I was just
got me fired up a little bit. Woo!
Well, let me get Sabe talking about some scheme too. So, if Luers does show that 3-2, right, with Schenk on one block and Waring on the other block, and you have Pointer and Wills, like, are you trying to throw the ball into the block, use the corners and throw the ball into the block, or what's your philosophy there if you had Lapel's roster?
Yeah, if you think about, if I'm looking at the numbers here, it looks like Lapel doesn't turn the ball over a whole lot. They shoot at like 29% as a team from three. But if they have their two studs, like you said, if Luers has their two studs on the block, you're probably going to have to, and we've said it like on this podcast, like you're probably going to have to distort the zone a little bit. You're probably going to have to, attack some gaps. You're going to have to pass fake, go the other way, and you're going to have to knock down some shots. Otherwise, they're just going to keep that zone compact. And, I'm guessing, just looking at, Shank and Waring, like they're not going to give up a lot of second opportunities. You know what I mean? Like they're going to get that defensive rebound and they're going to go the other way. So yeah, I would say, just, doing those things, but also don't let them get set in the zone. You can run a lot and you can use your defense to get the pace going the way you want it to go as well.
That's a good point. You brought up the rebounding. Luers hangs their hat on that. I mean, This is probably of the 8 teams left in 2A. This is the best rebounding team.
Yeah, because and I've said this a lot on this show. Like I always looked at 2 things after a game. How did we shoot? Did we have single digit turnovers? And then the third thing was always extra possessions. And some coaches, they'll send 2 players to the glass. Some will send 3, some might send more. I don't know. But like, if you're holding them to 1 shot and you're going the other way, like you said, with Shank and Waring down there, like it's, it could be a long day. Like you're gonna have to make some shots.
Moving on to the next semifinal game at Logansport in the Berry Bowl. It's Andrean 13-14, Lewis Cass 22-3. Did I get Andrean right? Is it Andrean or Andrian?
Andrean.
Of course. This is the third one I didn't even think of.
The only one you didn't say.
That's right. Andrean. I'm not fluent in, French or whatever. No split, and Andre. Jeez Louise. The A school defeated LaVille 31-26. Lewis Cass beat Fremont 37-25. There's that team name again. The 59ers have won 5 straight sectional championships, back-to-back regionals. Their regional win was by 5, and they played a pretty tough schedule with Crown Point, Lafayette Central Catholic, Lake Central, and Rensselaer. Maddie Walton and Lindsay Arkella are both players to watch for them. They're both averaging double figures. Lewis Cass has Afton Griffin at 12 points a game. Kinsey Menon is another name to watch. Both teams turn it over a lot, so it might not be the cleanest of games, but we'll see if Andrean can keep their magical season going.
Yeah, I do have a note on Andrean.
Sure.
They've got a kid by the name of Maddie Walton, and she is a college basketball. I mean, I don't know her, okay? And somebody please tweet at me if I don't know what club she plays in. I don't know if she has Division I offers. I don't know if she's a volleyball player. But this kid is like 6'2", ultra athletic. She's pulling down close to 10 boards a game, probably close to averaging a double-double. This kid is different. Like, she just looked so different out on the floor in watching Andrean play that she's a kid that could swing the balance toward Andrean in any basketball game because she's an impossible match. So, I mean, look, if you want to play college basketball, there's 6 or 7 people that you can contact in the state that will have multiple offers for you immediately. This kid's really good. So Maddie Walton is the watch there. And then, Lindsay Arcella, I think, is she's a volume scorer, volume shooter. Like they seem to run a lot through her. But that's a nice little 1-2 punch. Andrean was a fun watch.
In Cass is favored by 8, but like we were saying, like Andrean, went into sectionals probably 10-14 or whatever they were, and they're probably thinking, hey, our season might be over soon. And now all of a sudden you get this fresh start and the vibes are good, and who knows, like you could go in and upset and maybe possibly be playing for a semi-state championship.
Yeah, Lewis Cass, they're back to their very first game of the tournament in sectional. They won by 1 point in overtime. So they're one of those teams too, like that very first game, they almost got knocked out, 135-34 over North Miami, and then they've just went on a tear here. And so it'll be exciting to see them in semi-state.
Swinging down south now for our next 2A game. That's Brownstown Central 18-9 versus Linton-Stockton 20-6. Brownstown's coming off a win over South Spencer 55-50 in double overtime. Linton defeated North Decatur 37-30. DA and I connected with Linton-Stockton coach Jared Rehmel Jared Rehmel, I'm sorry, on last night. So I'm going to go ahead and roll that interview. Guys, I'm batting 1,000 today. I'm really killing it. Jeez Louise. I'm sorry, guys. Here we go. Seniors Brady Chambers and Sydney Geralds. I've seen their names been popping up a lot. What is it about that sets those two seniors apart and has made them such a special part of this program?
Well, I think the first thing is, they were freshmen on the state championship team. So they were able to kind of grow through watching how those kids went about their business and what it took and the sacrifices it took. So after seeing that, they were already skilled, but then they got in the gym and they continue to work and they continue to get better and they want to be coached. So, when you're coming in and at 6 a.m. and you're getting your shots up or you're doing your ball handling or you're doing whatever, that separates you from a lot of kids. And they were willing to sacrifice that time and probably some social life to get to the level that they're at. And, Brady, they're two different guards. Brady's like a combo guard that can play the point position, but also can really score it. And she's really good at using her body and getting in the lane and creating angles. And then, Sid is just super athletic and she's learned to, change directions and change speeds. So when you have a kid that's pretty fast and pretty quick with a high IQ that's changing speeds, you're able to be successful.
Brady specifically, she had 33 against North Knox in the sectional championship game. I screened your regional championship game against North Decatur, where she only had 12, but it was 2 assists. I think one with about 3 minutes left, and then one where she drove baseline and kind of dropped it across the paint for 2 assists, which you didn't know you needed at the time, but you actually did need them to close that game out. Just talk about her and what she's meant to this run.
She's incredible. And I would be silly not to say, obviously I'm biased. I think she's an Indian all-star. I mean, she's averaging 19 a game and 7 rebounds a game. And like you said, she makes everybody around her better constantly. And that's what it takes, and the belief has to come from somewhere with the rest of the team. And with her and Sid both, the other kids believe because of her. So they raise their level of play as well because she doesn't want to lose. She's just an incredible kid, incredible teammate. And I've been fortunate to be able to coach her for the last 4 years.
One of the other kids that came up big for you was Addison McKee. I saw she sank the couple free throws there late to help seal that win over North Decatur. I mean, just an ice in her veins type situation for that young lady.
Yeah, I'm so happy for her because she's probably not had the offensive year that she's wanted to have or she expected to have, and she could have pouted or she could have kind of put her head down, but instead she's guarded for us. She's rebounded for us. She's handled the ball more for us. She became she's always been a good teammate, but she's just a phenomenal teammate, whatever it takes to win. And for her to be able to hit a couple shots late and to make those free throws, it was just like a perfect scenario for a kid that really deserves it, because again, there's a lot of kids out there that probably not scoring like they want. So they're not going to be as engaged as what they should be.
Looking now at Brownstown Central, I'll just start broadly. You've had a chance to scout them on film a little bit. What jumps out to you when you see Brownstown Central?
Well, they execute at a high level. Coach Allman does a great job, and their kids, you can tell they're well coached. They're going to execute to a T. They're going to crash the boards hard. They've got 4 or 5 girls that are athletes. That are going to go try to get every single rebound. So we've got to understand that as a group that if we don't defensive rebound, then it's going to be a long morning for us.
Beyond Sydney Geralds and the stats that Brady Chambers, and the stats the coach mentioned there, Sydney Geralds averaging 14 a game. Then Addison McKee, like I mentioned, she had some big shots down the stretch for them in that regional.
Yeah, I think, and we were kind of talking about this in the chat, like how important freshmen are, when you're getting into these games. And that's been kind of a theme this year. We talked a lot about 2027s. Like I was fortunate enough, a few years ago, to have, 3 freshmen starting for me. And I think a lot of people will just assume that, okay, well, they're young and maybe a little naive, or they don't know the speed or the physicality. But a lot of times, like having freshmen, I think is a bonus, because it's like, you don't know what you don't know, and you just go out there and you play fearless. And I think we've started to see that a lot. And kind of getting back to what we were talking to earlier with Courtney is, I think the training and the high level AAU is starting at such a younger age that they're used to playing against this top competition. So, having freshmen in these big spots, it doesn't really seem to phase them.
Well, also, Josh, I mean, freshmen that have, watched state championship runs. I mean, Linton-Stockton had Vanessa Shafford, who was on the Indiana All-Star team, led them to back-to-back state championships too. And maybe Sherrills and Chambers weren't as obviously as big a part on that basketball team when you have kids like Shafford too. But even just watching and going through the experience of going through state championship runs has to be valued too. Because, I mean, you've got those kids now at Franklin, and we'll get into 4A, who were I don't want to call them on the end of the bench, but they were definitely coming off the bench after some other kids.
Yeah.
That's got to be a valuable experience too, right, Sabe?
Oh, absolutely. Like, and I think that's when you have a great program, is when, whether it's Linton-Stockton, or whether it's, Jac-Cen-Del or Lanesville, like these kids that are younger, they're getting a chance to experience these runs. And so now they know, like, when their number is called, or if they have to wait till they're a sophomore or a junior, like they've seen what it's like on the big stage. And I think it motivates them to want to get better and improve. So when their number is called, they're ready to contribute, because they've seen what it's like to play in these big time basketball games.
Did you say you had a stat on Linton, Hank?
That was the stat. I was going to ask Courtney, what's it like stepping onto the floor in these championship games, even just a sectional championship game as an underclassman? What do you remember about it?
I think when it comes to, so my freshman year, we went to Semistate. We lost in overtime, 71-62 to Jimtown. And in that game, like end of the game, end of regulation, like I remember the ball was in my hands. We had a lot of really good seniors on our team, but like, I remember those are the moments that, like, when you're out in your driveway by yourself as a kid in Indiana, that you like dream and that you are visualizing those moments. And so being in that moment, having your whole entire community there, and just that, like, you're so in the present moment during that time. And when it comes to freshmen, as we're talking about playing in like these big games, like there's a difference. There are freshmen who can go in and make impacts that they're really, really good basketball players. It doesn't, like, they're ready for it. Then you have freshmen who maybe, like, basketball isn't their thing, that they're going to be like make freshman mistakes and do those things. But there's the separator on a freshman that has just dedicated their time and energy into becoming a great basketball player. Like, they're going to go in and they're going to make an impact, and we'll see that this weekend in Semistate.
Yeah. And,
go ahead, Danny.
Closing point on Jared Rehmel too. Ever since the South Knox, North Knox, Linton-Stockton kind of Final Four in the sectionals, I've tried to screen a lot more of their games, and I called him this twice. I actually called him this to his face. So when you watch the interview, you'll see I call him the best coach south of Bedford. And now that Jeff Allen is retired, maybe he's the best coach south of, I don't know, Rod Parker's address, I guess. But one thing that he does, which is really unique, is he puts individual game plans in. If you watch the sectional championship game versus North Knox, he ran some double stack stuff, but also kind of unbalanced the floor and kind of ran kind of a dribble drive to create gaps for both Sherrills and Chambers. And Sherrills and Chambers, I mean, I talked about the 33 that Brady had. Sherrills also got off in that game too. But the next round, the regional championship, they played a team in, I think it was North Decatur, maybe, that had multiple post players, including a really good player by the name of Kuntz. And he was putting them in like dribble handoff action and making them hedge and come out on the floor. And so it seemed like a special that he put in for that game. But this is a guy that studies the film. He identifies something that he needs to do. He puts a plan in place. He implements it in practice, and then he gets execution on game day. Like, that is coaching, guys. Like, that is absolutely coaching. So they're a tough out. I mean, and we'll see if they can advance past Brownstown Central. But I mean, Eastern Hancock might be looming.
Yeah, and that was fun about talking with Coach there too. Was just listen to you two break it down, and just like the way that he described like his approach to games and just how he morphs things as necessary with the personnel that he has. Really good stuff. And too, Danny cited some specific plays. I had to cut it down for time, obviously, but Danny cited some specific plays too, and the two broke them down involving Brady Chambers. So encourage everybody to listen to that. All interviews, again, full interviews will be available on the YouTube channel after this live show wraps up. Moving on to that other 2A semifinal, it's a couple Central Indiana teams, a couple area teams for me. Eastern Hancock 24-1 against Sheridan 20-5. Eastern Hancock, we've talked about them all year, just kind of a loaded juggernaut with just the seniors they have, and then Kenzie Cook coming in behind them as a freshman, joining that starting lineup. Just a really talented group who's been here before. They got here last year, came up short. They're facing a Sheridan team that has not been here before, or at least it's been a really long time. Kenzie Garner is the star for them. Cecilia Tim's another name to keep an eye on. I'll just throw it out there and just thoughts on this matchup coming in.
Yeah, I love this Eastern Hancock team. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Lanesville team in the sense that like they're not just a good 2A team, like they're just a good team. Like they're I think they're top. I think they're 42 in Sagarin. You know, they've got players all over the floor. They shoot 34% as a team, only 11.9 turnovers, so they take care of it pretty well. You know, and they're skilled. They got a lot of really strong upperclassmen. And I think the thing that and I've said this before, but like the thing that I'm really excited about with this group is that they've kind of given the keys over to Mackenzie Cook, and and to earn that trust as a freshman, it's pretty special. And I think you know, they're just getting started. Like I could very easily see them going to Gainbridge next week.
Courtney or Danny?
No, I mean, Eastern Hancock they're complete, but now that North Knox is out, South Knox is out, I mean, they're the favorite in that semi-state down there. So I think the big thing for them is they're just going to have to be them. Okay. And they're going to have to get Ruby her touches and get her 10 points and 6 rebounds. And Kenzie Cook's going to have to make shots. But the one thing before I get off of the Eastern Hancock thing is, you know, they've been junked through the year. We brought it up on I think one of the preview shows for 2A. But there was a game, I think Triton Central was the architect of the junk, and they didn't guard Brooklyn Willis. And Brooklyn Willis, who was a kid who wasn't guarded, I think hit 3 threes in the first half when she wasn't guarded. So that's the shape of a championship team when you can take away what you do best and still hurt you.
Do you think Eastern Hancock's the favorite out of the South? You pick them over Linton-Stockton?
I do. I do, just because of the depth and the balance on their roster. I think they can beat you in more ways. Now, Jared's going to put a plan in place, and that plan might be good enough. But as Sherry Dowd prepares for Linton-Stockton in what will be probably just a couple of hours before the game, if that doesn't come to fruition, they can fall back and beat you in another way, I think. So I think Eastern Hancock, I lean to them as the favorite, but boy, that one sets up to be one that I'm going to want to watch for sure. Eastern Hancock and Linton.
And I think Linton, honestly, obviously Jared has the pedigree, like they've won state championships before. So this is not his first go around, but also like Linton plays a tougher schedule than Eastern Hancock too. So if they end up matched up in the final, like Linton won't be afraid of that matchup at all.
You're right.
Sheridan, like I mentioned, they have Kenzie Garner, who's averaging 21 a game and 10 rebounds. So she's good for a double-double. Plus, you throw in the 5 assists and 4 steals and 2 blocks. I mean, the kid does everything. We talked about her a lot last week, but I just wanted to shout her out again, as well as Cecilia Timms, who's back and playing and starring well for Sheridan. It's been a great run for Sheridan. I'm not presuming anything, but if this is the end and if we don't get another chance to talk about them in this context of a preview of a game, tip of the cap to them on what's been a phenomenal season and some really talented players, most of whom are coming back next year. So they'll be right back into the thick of things once we get sectional sorted out. Moving up now to 3A, Hamilton Heights, Norwell. Hamilton Heights 24-2, Cameron Runner. and some of the other pieces there. Cameron didn't have to do everything last week in their regional game. I'm curious to see what they do now against Norwell, 21-4. Norwell's played the toughest schedule in Class 3A. They took Lawrence North down to the buzzer. They've played Homestead. They've played Snyder. They've played dang near everybody, and they've come out of that at 21-4. Just a really, really talented team. That's going to be such a fun matchup with those contrasting styles.
Danny, I got a question for you, a coaching question. Obviously, Norwell, they're the favorite. They're a 5-point favorite. Like Hank said, they play the toughest schedule in 3A. They're ranked 6th in the state, period, regardless of class, according to Sagarin. If you're a coach, if you're coaching Norwell and you're the favorite, are you doing anything special to slow down Runner, or are you saying we're the better team? We're going to do what we do. We're going to run our stuff, and we're going to win. We don't need anything special to slow down an individual player.
I mean, Sabe loves asking questions that he already knows the answer to, clearly. But I mean, as a coach, can you go home and eat dinner if Runner goes out and gets 37 and you lose? Like, there's no way. I don't know that Cameron Runner. She might be so talented that it transcends being able to limit her to single digits or even a dozen. But I'm not letting her get 30 or 40. And we know from some of the statistical outputs in this year, I mean, she's capable of going out and getting 40 and 50. But I'm going to make it difficult on her. I'm going to put people in her face, in her vision. I'm going to foul her. I'm going to make her shoot free throws. I'm going to blitz her ball screens. I'm going to chase her off the line. I'm going to body her up. I mean, there's no question in my mind that Cameron Runner's name is going to be mentioned a bunch if I was in the Norwell locker room.
100%. Coach is absolutely right. Like, and that was kind of the point that I was trying to make was, and Hank just threw it in the chat. Players like Hickok, Brown, and Cherry, they're going to have to step up. Like they're going to have to make shots, because what's going to end up happening is Cam is she's still going to get hers. She's a phenomenal player, but they're going to make it very, very, very challenging for her to get to her spots. So Hamilton Heights is going to have to come up with a way to get the others involved, and they're going to have to make shots, because if they don't, Cam still might get hers, but it could be a double-digit victory easily. But if the supporting players on Hamilton Heights make shots, now all of a sudden, okay, you got yourself a ball game.
This is a philosophical thing, but if you're going to let kids shoot or encourage other kids to beat you, sometimes you need them to make shots too. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you get a kid who doesn't get a lot of volume from an attempts perspective, okay, and they hit their first or even they hit their second, maybe they turn 2 for 2 into 3 for 11. Mm-hmm. If you get a kid that doesn't shoot and they miss their first 3, they're ending the game 0 for 3, and they're going to try to figure out how to get Runner some volume. So maybe it's a good thing to even get to almost facilitate that balance if you're Norwell. But before, and I know Courtney's going to have some perspective on Norwell, and I'm anxious to hear it, but I'll plug Hank's story for him. To me, this is about Kennedy Felling for me. I mean, Feast is a great player, and Hubble's a great player, and Norwell is so well coached and so balanced, but Hank had Felling on his all-star team, and you go out and beat Hamilton Heights and Runner and represent the north side of the state. I mean, Kennedy, you might fit yourself in red, white, and blue with Indiana across the front sometime in June, maybe.
She was the first one off, and it was a choice that I toiled lift for an embarrassing amount of time. Like, I don't think people realize how much thought actually goes into these. Like, it's not just us flying by the seat of our pants when we do these things. But, and this is something, Danny, that you mentioned that I hadn't considered. Like, I just figured I'm going to be wrong, and I'll be really happy to be wrong, and she's going to get on there. I just don't know who to take off. Because it's always easy to say, this kid should be on there, and this kid should be on there, that kid should be on there. I don't disagree, but who do you take off to get that kid on there? And I think that Felling, this opportunity that she has now to compete on the semi-state stage, regardless of what happens, win or lose, wise, she's going to ball out. Like, we know she's going to have a great game. So win or lose, I think that's going to be what pushes her over the top, is getting on there. And honestly, like I was telling you guys, like, it came down to splitting literal hairs to try and figure out who to get on there. But I mean, just a phenomenal season. Program's all-time leading scorer. She got that, I think it was during regionals last week. Her and Feast actually. Oh, go ahead, Josh.
I was just say to quote Courtney, bulletin board material. So if I'm Kennedy Felling, I'm bookmarking the 4850 mark on this podcast. And I'm listening to it over and over and over before Saturday.
I'm going to shove it out that marble mouth, guys. Look at
and I'm going to come out and I'm going to dominate both games.
Yeah. So massive apologies to Hamilton Heights for the beast that I might have just unleashed. But in all seriousness, Mackenzie Feast, Kennedy Felling, they combined for about 58% of Norwell's scoring. So it is kind of a striking similarity between them and Hamilton Heights with Cameron Runner. But then, too, like Josh mentioned, I mean, the next two on there, Ella Hickok specifically, always plays well when I've seen them. They do a lot of the heavy lifting there for Hamilton Heights as well. Courtney, I apologize for jumping in there and derailing the conversation, but I'll throw it over to you.
Absolutely. I just want to shout out Norwell's coach, Coach Thornton. He's in his 27th year. I've done work up there in their youth program, and he's one of those coaches that he's in it for the right reasons. He has an amazing feeder program. He's invested, and a lot of the girls that are going to be out there playing on Saturday are girls that, when I was up there, they were in that program, that feeder system, and these girls have been putting the work in, and it's all fundamental. I'm super pumped to watch this game, and I like looking at the mental, emotional of these games. And I just wanted to mention that it was Hamilton Heights who knocked Norwell out last year of the regional by 4 points, 44-40. So it's another one of those games where Norwell's had this game, if they can match up with them again in semi-state, marked. And so can they keep their emotions in check? And it's going to be one of those games. I think it's another coin toss flip on this one. It could go either way. And this is a game, if you love girls basketball, tune into this game on Saturday.
Would you, looking at the draw for Courtney and Josh, do you like it when you have to play the other best team in your quadrant right off the bat, or would you rather delay that and deal with it in the championship game?
Courtney, go ahead.
You bring them on first. I mean, you gotta match up with them at some point. So why not do it while you're fresh and get after it? There's no way around it. Whoever you got, like we said at the very beginning of this podcast, one game at a time. So you're gonna have to focus at some point on that team.
Josh?
I want to play on the biggest stage. I want to play for all the marbles. I remember there was a couple of times we played Center Grove early in the sectional, and it was fine. But there's something about playing for the championship against the best team that just makes it a little bit more special, I think.
I want the 5 days. I'll take the 5 days to prepare versus the 5 hours. Give me the best.
Yeah, that's
first.
True. And we'll talk about that tomorrow, I'm sure, on the coach when we bring the coaches table. But yes, this week is tricky. Winning 2 games in one day is it's not easy. Trust me. There is a lot of sleepless nights, I'm sure, going on this week.
Moving on now to the other 3A North semi-state semifinal. Bremen 15-11, Northwood 20-6. That one's the noon game in Huntington North. Bremen is caught fire here lately. They're on a 7-game win streak. They've knocked off Tippecanoe Valley in overtime. They won by 4 over Hanover Central last week in regional. On the other side, Northwood, they only lost to Tippy Valley in OT and then Wawasee. Kind of a random loss by a point late in the season. Otherwise, they've only lost to 4A programs. I was texting with Austin Huff, friend of the program, a couple nights ago about that Northwood-Bremen matchup, and I pointed out, with Northwood, they had the girl who got knocked in the face, had to get stitched up during the game, came back out and dominated defensively for them. I was like, she's a tough kid, and he said, yeah, that's kind of the identity of that Northwood team, is that they're just tough group. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays, because they're the favorite on paper, 20-6, but Bremen, they might have some magic going on that one. Moving on now to the south, we have another game with interviews. We have Bishop Chatard 19-8, Danville 23-3. Bishop Chatard's coming off that 64-60 win over Indian Creek. Danville beat Speedway 57-23. Here's our interview, or an excerpt from our interview with Kaley May.
Resilience with this group, and we've got a lot of balance. And I think our leadership has really taken us far this year. Cooper Stone obviously went down for us in December, but she has remained a big voice for us on the sidelines. And her and Emma Ancelet are close and great leaders for our groups. And Emma's been playing great. And I think, she's kind of the catalyst for us. So when she's playing great, we roll with her, and she opens up a lot of doors for us as a team. So, shout out to her for the season that she's had as a junior. And I really appreciate, what she's been able to allow our team to do just with her skill set.
While we're on Ancelet, and I, of course, she would come up this early in the conversation, but she had arguably the second best team in your sectional was Cascade. She has 27 against them, but in the next two games, the sectional championship game and the regional championship game, her point production was down, but she had 9 assists and 10 assists respectively.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So she seems like a kid who's just going to do what you need to win. Is that the way that she approaches every game, or do you approach just trying to get her point production up?
No, that's points really aren't a focal point for her or our staff. I mean, she really is the kind of kid that's just going to do what needs to be done to win. And I think she kind of takes it with whatever she's receiving that night defensively. If they're running and jumping her or trapping her, then she's finding the open person or setting up the play for somebody to get an easy bucket. So I think she gets more excited about sweet assists than she does her own points most of the time. So and we make a big point out of it, as a staff and as a team, of really recognizing the playmaking ability that she has and that others have for with passing just as much as we do the scoring side of it. So, she's, like I said, she's opened a lot of doors for us offensively with what we can do, and setting up other players on our team to get good looks just because of who she is.
Addison Davis, too, for you guys. I mean, she's just tenacious on the board, scoring a ton of points for you. What have you seen out of her this year?
She's just a monster in the best way. I mean, she's relentless when it comes to rebounding. Probably one of the best rebounders I've seen, and definitely that I've coached. She just she has no quit in her, and she's fearless on the court. And I think her toughness and her own life carries over to sports for sure. And so, it's when she has those great games or high scoring games, or high rebounding games, it's really great to see because she works so hard. So when you see, her get recognized for having a great game, it's exciting for all of us because of the kind of kid she is.
But looking at Bishop Chatard now, the physicality that they bring and some of the different pieces that they have, what do they compare to other teams that you've seen this season?
They're a little bit of a lot of teams that we've played. So, I think of some of our more physical opponents and our tougher rebounding teams that we've played against, like Decatur Central and Silver Creek. They've got, guard balance out front and multiple weapons similar to Plainfield. So, we've seen several teams that have challenged us in different ways. And I think Chatard's going to be the same way. We have got to be very fundamental with how we approach the game. We've got to have the correct rotations, get ball pressure where we need it so they can't get the ball inside to Caskey, try to close up driving lanes so Berzai doesn't get, easy driving lanes to the rim. And so a big focus for us, the two big focuses I think will be transition defense and rebounding. But the thing I love about this game is I think that a lot of our strengths are their strengths as well. So it'll be fun because I think we're very even in a lot of ways.
That was Danville coach Kaley May. You can watch all these interviews in their entirety on the YouTube channel once this live show wraps up. Danny, you ran on the full interview, so I'll let you start the discussion on Danville versus Chatard.
Yeah, Chatard scored 64 points against Indian Creek, which is, we talked about how, offensive production is down, particularly in postseason, because they're just a little bit more cautious with their decision making, and kids that aren't shooters don't shoot, quite honestly. So I think the defensive matchups against Berzai and Caskey are going to be really important. And I also think Danville, they've opened a lot of basketball games. If you go back and watch them on film or have seen them play live, they do mix in some odd front zone. They do have a 2-2-1 that they go to, but they kind of had this 1-3-1 kind of 3-quarter trap. It'll be interesting to see if Kaley's brave enough to play that with the idea that you might be able to, play through the middle through Kasky a little bit if you do that. Berzai might get some looks. So I think how they match up is going to be interesting. But to close, Ancelet, if you haven't seen her, guys, tune in. This kid's really, really good. She's had a great season. I mean, a great season. And she's a fun watch. And she does I mentioned the 27 that she had against Cascade when we were doing the interview, but she was dropping dimes in those last 2 games, 9 and 10 assists respectively. And they were tough passes, like long over the shoulder rim runs, penetration, like hammer action, where she was penetrating baseline and just ripping it with her left hand to the weak side corner. Just really high level basketball. She's a fun watch.
Yeah, the only thing that I have is that it's fascinating because Chatard plays a more challenging schedule, but Danville turns it over way less. So I don't know if that's because that, you know what I mean? Like Danville's decision making is better, or if it's just because Chatard has played a tougher schedule. I guess we'll find out. I mean, it's a 4-point spread, going Danville's way, but one of those things has to give, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned the scheduling, and that's the big thing with Chatard. They really hung their hat on that this year, is just scheduling tough. Scottsburg, a team we're going to talk about here in a second, they went down there, played them at the beginning of the year. Gibson Southern, another team, the opposite team that we're going to be talking about in just a minute here, went down and played them as well. So they played a bit of everybody. Chatard has a bunch of different styles, and same with Danville. And it was interesting, too, talking to Kaley, just the similarities between the teams. They both like to play physical, and really just with a matchup like this with 2 teams that like to play so physically, it's going to be interesting to see how it's called. Is the officiating going to be tight? Are they going to let them play a little bit? And which side's able to take better advantage of that? It'll be interesting to see. But then Danny, too, you mentioned with Chatard, it's like it's not always the most efficient scoring sometimes. Like, they miss some around the basket, but I mean, they scored 60 plus last week. They put up 70 at a holiday tournament against Twin Lakes earlier this year. So they're a team that can really surprise you if you're having an off night defensively, that Chatard group. So it's going to be a really, really fun game there in 3A. Moving on now to Scottsburg, our final 3A semi-state semifinal of the day. Scottsburg 22-4, Gibson Southern 23-4. No stats available for Scottsburg, but they're big. They're big and they're physical. They beat Chatard during the season at the beginning of the year. Gibson Southern, on the other hand, they have some really talented shooters there with Chloe Graham and Gabby Spink. Scottsburg's coming off the win over Greensburg by 11. Gibson Southern beat Washington by 13.
Go ahead, Sabe.
Courtney, I got a question for you.
Bring it on.
Okay, so Hank said that Scottsburg is really, really big, okay? And Gibson Southern is known for their guard play. So when you're going into these, win or go home games, would you rather have a more dominant front court or back court? And why?
I think that you win games with your guards. You have to be able to handle the ball, and I think that guards also set the tone on defense, and I think defense really set the tone on winning a championship. So I would rather have a great guards on the court to win a game because, I mean, as you saw, like I always bring this up, but when Purdue men have Zach Edey does what he does, but the guards didn't play good last year and they got bounced out of the tournament. Like your guards have got to produce during the tournament.
Yeah, I agree, and that's exactly where I was going. I like both of these teams. Like if you look at their resumes, both very strong. They played a really tough schedule. Both teams, they played against a lot of these top 64, top 25 teams. But I think at the end of the day, when you have Spink and you have Graham, that's a great combo going into the semi-state.
Yeah, the construction of Gibson Southern is they kind of have this their own version of kind of their big 3. You guys have mentioned Gabby Spink and Chloe Graham, but Paige Schnaus, there's another freshman for you, impact player. That kid's going to be a load in 3A, a lot. But I think Gibson Southern to me looks more complete every time I watch them play. Like in the regional championship game against Washington, and Washington's a top 10 team in 3A with Katie Reed and a lot of tradition there. But they got Ravelette and Malone. They scored 12 and 9 points respectively. And I think the statistic is that both those kids scored 6 points over their average. So to get 21 points from Ravelette and Malone, while your big 3 is still making big plays, like down the stretch in that game, like Spink had a big and one. Schnell's had like a no look pass across the lane for another bucket in the middle of their run. Chloe Graham was making shots. But to get production from your 4 and 5 or your quote unquote role players, I think is big in any setting, in any basketball game, but particularly a game where we were talking about it, Sabe, like they're likely going to load up on Spink and Graham and try to make him beat you in another way. So to have the confidence that Ravelette and Malone must be feeling right now after being big contributors to a regional championship, I think is going to play well for them going into the semi-state weekend.
All right, one more class to go here. We have Class 4A. We'll start up in LaPorte. Homestead, 23-4. Lake Central, 24-4. This is where I'm going to be on Saturday, starting my day in LaPorte. 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern start. You have Homestead. You have Lake Central. Lake Central coming off that big win over South Bend, Washington. Homestead with Maya Epps and company leading the way. They took out McCutcheon. Josh, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, on paper, this Homestead has all the advantages. They've got, better Sagarin, better strength of schedule, better record against top 25. Obviously, Rod Parker is, has a winning pedigree. Their teams are always competing for state championships, it seems like. You mentioned Epps, you mentioned Helsum. On paper, this should be a Homestead game. But for some reason, we keep doubting Lake Central. We doubted them last year. They won. We doubted them this year. One of the many picks we got wrong on this show. Okay. And they win. So I think, it's easy for us to sit here and say that, okay, Homestead has every advantage, but there's just something about this Lake Central team. And this is a tip of the cap to Coach Huppenthal. He always seems to overachieve. So I'm really, really curious to see how this game plays out.
Court? Or Danny?
I think that Rod Parker is a legendary coach. You sat down and you talked to that guy about the game of basketball. And being able to watch Maya Epps last weekend, the regional at Marion, that girl can hoop. And so Rod Parker and Maya Epps going into this game against Lake Central, that's a good combo of IQ going into that game. But I'm with Josh, Lake Central, we counted them out this past weekend, and they're on this train. So it's going to be one of those games that I think, I've said one of the key matchups to watch this weekend is going to be that game right there.
And let's not sleep on Joe Huppenthal. Rod Parker's great. So is Joe Huppenthal. And Hank, what was the quote? Steve Reynolds said he put all 37 years experience into that one basketball game, right?
Yeah,
maybe that was
great.
Austin Huff's quote.
Yeah.
So the Joe Huppenthal versus Parker will be interesting. But for me, the what to watch is these are 10 guards. When we go out for the opening tip, it's going to be 10 guards. For Lake Central, it's going to be Wimberly and Clayton and Krieger and Bishop and Malosnik, who's had a great postseason, by the way, shooting the basketball. And then for Homestead, Ankenbrook, Helsum, Mollering, Maya Epps, and now the healthy Emma Royst too. So I think when you have 10 guards, I would suspect a lot of 5-out action. And I think the key to the game is going to be who can guard the opposing team without bringing help, or at least minimal help. Because if Epps or Royst or Wimberly or somebody like that is going to get into the paint off the bounce, you're going to have to bring help from somewhere. And no matter how much we tell our kids, say, stay home, stay home, stay home, the natural tendency is that they're going to sag in and drop to the ball handler, to the level of the basketball. And I think it'll be interesting to see who's making shots because, Helsum and Mollering and Ankenbrook can stick it. So can Malosnik. Bishop had 2 threes in the fourth quarter against South Bend, Washington, which ended up being huge. So 10 guards, fun one.
Yeah.
Big thing, too, is probably going to be turnovers for Homestead. They average about 12 a game. It's actually, it evens out between that and their steals per game, both around 10 to 12 on either side of that, turnovers and steals. Can Lake Central heat them up like they did South Bend, Washington? And then for Homestead's side, will they be able to get that score up and get it to a point where Lake Central can't keep up? But it's going to be a really fun game. We'll have a little bit more on that, I think, when we go to do predictions tomorrow. Next semifinal game, Noblesville at Valparaiso, a rematch from earlier this year at the Noblesville Holiday Classic. A little bit of an more even playing field here, aside from Noblesville having to travel North this time, but you're not getting a 10 a.m. start, which hurt Valparaiso the first time around. Noblesville was at full strength, which handcuffed them a little bit last time, even though they won. They'll have Ava Shoemaker back. Whoever wants to start with this one, I'll let you have it.
I think it's fascinating. A lot of times when you go into these semi-states, like you've never seen the team that you're playing, or like you don't even know where they're from or what their mascot. You're like, you know nothing about them. And the fact that these two teams have already played, I think plays in for both of them. Like they've seen each other from the mental side. They're able to prepare for it. And I wasn't able to be on the show the other day, but I wanted to shout out and just Meredith Tipner and how she played in the regional. I wanted to do it on this show, like from the beginning of the game to the end. Like that girl was all over the court. So shout out to you, Meredith Tipner. And this game, I'm going to have this one dialed in. I can't wait for this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, I mean, you've got two legendary coaches. I mean, Donna Buckley's got 342 wins. Candy Wilson's got 403 wins. I mean, these are two legendary coaches, coaching in this game. I know we talk a lot about Noblesville on the show, and rightfully so. I mean, they deserve all the praise that they get. But Valparaiso is interesting to me because when you have players like Barnes and Gert, you always have a chance. Always. And I know on paper it looks like that Noblesville is a big favorite in this game, but I think when you have really talented players that can score the basketball, you always have a chance, because a lot of times when you have two great coaches like this, they're going to be on top of their game. So a lot of the scout and the in-game adjustments, that's going to cancel each other out. And now players have to step up and make plays. And I think, you always think, Wilson and you think Tipner, rightfully so. But on the other end, you got Barnes and Gert, who they can get theirs too. So, I don't count Valpo out of this.
There's a big difference between playing in the regular season and playing in the postseason, but there's also the addition of Ava Shoemaker. Ava Shoemaker didn't play in the first matchup. And so let's look at her postseason. I mean, there was a baseline out of bounds in the sectional championship game where Reagan Wilson shot it to the weak side corner and Ava Shoemaker hits a three. After ball reversal, she dribbled with her left hand and hit a contested little 10-footer. She got an offense. Tipner was 3 for 4 down the stretch in that basketball game. On the one free throw that Tipner missed, Ava Shoemaker got an offensive rebound. Like, that's a kid that makes winning plays. In that winter matchup in the holiday tournament too, Valpo played them in an odd front zone for a lot of the first half of that. And when you can have another shooter like Shoemaker now that can spread the floor and make shots, that's going to be a very risky defense now too. And then if they go into man, now do you have, let's say that Reagan, gets rid of the basketball in their continuity man and then empties out into one side and Shoemaker's on that side. Now that's a driving lane for Tipner. If you make a mistake and come off of help, you're going to catch and release threes for both Shoemaker and Wilson. So I think the addition of Ava Shoemaker and getting her back for this game, I think, is going to be the eventual difference in it. But Barnes has to be, Barnes had trouble in the regular season matchup getting good quality, and I've celebrated her for not being able to speed her up. Having watched that basketball game, Noblesville sped her up. And so she's going to have to settle down. Candy Wilson's going to have to find where she can get her touches. She has now graduated to the point where she's making the right play. You look at the last play against Northridge, they come out in that extended 2-3. It's very easy to just say, hey, Lily, go win us the game. We're down 1 and Semistate is on the line. Go make a play. She gets an extended 2-3, takes the trap. She draws it away and makes the pass to the open defender, and they get an and one for Gert and end up winning the basketball game. So that's very fascinating to see what Candy Wilson does with Barnes to get her touches. And then let's watch Shoemaker, because Valpo hasn't seen Noblesville with Shoemaker yet.
One other note on – go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think one thing, too, that Coach Wilson, and like I said, she's phenomenal. I mean, all you got to do is look at her record. But I think the thing that is probably an advantage for Valpo to play Noblesville first is that this whole week of practice, you have to ramp up the intensity level. Like, if you look at Noblesville's strength of schedule, you look at their sectional, and you look – at the dogfight they were in against Fort Wayne Snyder, like, you'll know within the first 2-3 minutes of this game if Valpo is ready for that level of intensity, because Noblesville, they've been going through it since October, and that would be my biggest concern going in is are my players ready for this level of intensity?
Valparaiso, too, it's worth pointing out that they were still figuring some things out. They were just getting everybody back healthy. Lily Barnes was finally recovering from her offseason back injury. So they're looking like a lot better team than they did over Christmas break. And it'll be interesting to see how far they've progressed against a Noblesville team, like we mentioned, it's in full strength. Kicking down to the 4A South now, Lawrence Central 27-1 versus Plainfield 18-7. Lawrence Central has just been bullying their way through the tournament. And then on the other side, Plainfield overcame an upset bid by Pike to get to Semistate. Danny, it's your turn.
Lawrence Central is the best team remaining, guys. Okay. And we'll talk about this in the predictions and what we all think about that. But this is a team that is beating you in different ways. The matchup zone. Jayla Lampley hits 4 threes in the first half against it. She just transformed herself into a catch and release shooter. Sabe was talking about, hey, you can try to zone them, but the team's shooting 38% from 3. Man, they probably shot 50% from 3 in that game. I think Jayla Lampley had 5 threes. Berkeeb had 4. Like, this is a basketball team now that it's not just turning you over. They're not just bullying you, with their physicality. They're not just getting Lola and Jayla downhill and getting them into the paint and letting them attack downhill. But now they're shooting the ball too. They look invincible. They look like they feel invincible. They look like they know it. Plainfield has a tough time in front of them. But Peyton Benj, Berkeley Williams has been awesome throughout this run. And every time we talk about him, I seemingly get it wrong because Berkeley's been so good. And Hannah Menser in her first semi-state, what will be multiple semi-states, I'm sure, for that kid because she's super talented. But with the size of Peyton Benj, I mean, she's going to have to impact the basketball game on both ends. She's going to have to win the rebounding battle. She's going to have to give them some offensive production. And look, I mean, when we started this podcast, I mean, it was Peyton B and then Peyton Bengi. And now we finally figured out that it's Peyton Benj. Right, Hank? So,
yeah, thanks.
So
once again, saying names correctly is not our thing.
I did, and I still made an ass of myself.
Said that podcast number 1.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I think that's the kid that, and not to put a lot on this kid, but she's going to have to be special in this game because Lawrence Central's full of special.
Popping in real quickly to plug a story. Matthew Van Trine's helping us out this week. I had a lot of stuff going on this week, but Matthew Van Trine's helping us out. He has a story coming on Peyton Benj and Kurt Benj and just their relationship father-daughter. I got to know Peyton a little bit over media day. And her golf prowess and some other things. So I'm really excited to share Matthew's story with everybody.
Yeah, the benches are great. Like, Kurt is a phenomenal coach. He's going to have a plan. I think, on paper, the thing that stands out is that versus common opponents, Lawrence Central 7-0 and Plainfield's 2-4. So on paper, it does look like Plainfield's going to have their hands full. But like I said, when you have these freshmen or sophomores, in the case of Menser in Williams, and then you have that senior that you can count on in Peyton Benj, and then Kurt, who is very, very experienced, they will have a plan and they will be ready.
Court?
I have not much to add. I mean, Lawrence Central is the team to beat, and so everybody in the state knows it. And so, it, like we said, I'm going to repeat it again, one game at a time. It's going to take whoever is playing Lawrence Central is going to have a game plan that they can execute to a T, and Lawrence Central is going to have a bit of an off night offensively, and in order for anybody to come close to beating them.
One more thing, Hank. Sorry. So here's something that I'm sure we'll talk about tomorrow on the podcast is I'm curious if Lawrence Central has been working on Center Grove or Franklin at all. Like, I'm just curious because, if you look at it on paper, it would seem that, Lawrence Central got a very good draw. Plainfield is going to give them everything they can handle. But I'm also curious if LC's been working on that against that pack line defense of Center Grove's. Or I wonder if they've been working on closing out on Franklin shooters, just because like we were talking earlier, Danny said, like, you only have 5 hours between games. Like, you got to be working on stuff. So I'm curious. I wonder, like, how much these coaches have been focusing on the first game, but also like, okay, we got a second game too.
That'll be something we discuss tomorrow on a podcast, and I will delve into more details once we get past this final game here. Center Grove, Franklin. Center Grove comes in 26-1, Franklin 24-3. A rubber match from the regular season. Center Grove won in the Johnson County tournament. Franklin came back, won the regular season meeting. Courtney, if you want to start, I'll let you start us on this final game.
Absolutely. Center Grove, I'm going to talk about them a little bit and their defense. And as the saying goes, defense wins championships. And I know, I think I might have voted against Center Grove, picked against them last week, but hopefully it was locker room material. And Center Grove, if you guys can lock in defensively and be a defensive power in this semi-state matchup, you guys will advance on to see who we probably will be LC. But if you don't play defense, Franklin is so good offensively. They have such good team chemistry that the game will be swung if Center Grove does not come ready to play defense.
Hank, Center Grove is 26-1. Okay. The only blemish on that record was against Franklin. And if you remember that game, it was at Center Grove earlier in the season. At the end of the first quarter, Center Grove was winning 28-10. Center Grove was winning 28-10 after one, and they ended up losing, what was it, like 64-53 or 64-55? Anyway, it was like an 8-point Franklin win. So I remember because I was watching that game, I was streaming that game, and the three things that Franklin did, no one has been able to do since. And that is play through a post inside to soften up the pack line, run, get easy baskets on the other end, and then shoot over the top of the pack line, which Lauren Clem did. She was 6 for 8 from 3. So Franklin, out of all of these teams, because we've been talking about on this pod for a while that Center Grove is number one. They're number one in Sagarin. They're number one on the Save Palm rankings. Franklin has the formula. They've done it. They've done those three things. They play through Eric on the post to soften up the pack line. They run to get easy baskets, and then they shoot over the top. Other teams have tried since then. Jennings County, LN, B&L. They have not been able to do it. HSE. They have not been able to do it. Can Franklin, they have the formula. Can they do it again? I'm fired up for this matchup.
Yeah, I am too. So as you mentioned the 6 threes that Clem had, the very next possession after Clem hits her 6th 3 in that basketball game, she penetrates the lane, collapses the defense, kicks it to York, who hits another 3. Mm-hmm. Like they were in their rhythm. And I think that's the what to watch in this game is going to be, can Franklin get in that rhythm? That's what they do all year. And I talked about their identity of how they sometimes they even pass up layups to kick for 3, but they flood the weak side of the floor. They exit cut better than any other basketball team. They throw strikes to their shooters. If they're not open, they just Kimball just backs up a couple of steps. Like it is so unique, but they have to make shots. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I would point out is, aside from, I think, Clem's 5th 3, where she just dribbled up to the right wing and then shot a 3, most of them came off of dribble penetration. Mm-hmm. So again, it comes back to what Center Grove's identity is in guarding that pack line is, can they keep Clem out of the paint to eventually and subsequently reduce the amount of good looks that Franklin can get from the 3-point line. But something interesting in that game that stuck, he was so mad at their defense in that game. And after I think York hit that 3, I think there's about 4 minutes left in the game. He calls timeout and he doesn't even go into the huddle. Just watching it, like Booker ran the huddle. And so, yes, it's the one blemish. Okay. But maybe the most important basketball game that they had, because I think maybe that was the game where they learned that they don't just get to walk out there and just stand on the pack line and just guard people and think that they're not going to try to beat them. Since that game, they haven't been touched, guys. They haven't been touched. And so I think the familiarity might scare Center Grove, but that one timeout is, and probably over analysis for me. I mean, I wasn't in the huddle, but it just looked like something that could have just turned their entire season around. And then early in that game too, and this will be my final point, like they built the I think it was 3 separate 18-point leads in the first quarter. Bischoff was getting wherever she wanted. So on the other side, while they have to keep Clem out of the paint, they have to continually attack downhill and get Bischoff in the paint. And that's going to loosen things up. Ava Grant had 22 in that game. A large reason was because Bischoff was in the paint, shooting right-handed layups and then kicking out to her.
And also, I'll also add one more thing. Sorry, Hank, I know we're running 90 minutes, but on the Center Grove side, what we've started to see more of is they're starting to go to Wirtz early. Mm-hmm. They were running some Iverson action. They were running some high-low action. Get her involved in the game, and then all of a sudden, all the other stuff opens up. So they've actually, like, since even like when sectional started, they've been putting in some new actions, which I think have been great additions to what they already do.
A note on Rachel Wirtz, that was the backup plan on the 3 that I wrote about. Andrean in the regional championship game against BNL. She hit that 3 that kind of swung to start the second half, that swung the game for Center Grove. The other option was they had that high-low action with Rachel Wirtz inside. So if the 3 wasn't there for an A, she was going to dump it in and Rachel was going to go to work. So to Josh's point there, it's an interesting matchup with where these two teams are at. Center Grove, I mean, they played just such a great game against BNL. It was a really ugly first half offensively, but the job they did defensively for the entire 32 minutes was unbelievable, shutting down BNL the way they did. And then once their offense gets going, I mean, it was just what makes that team so dang good. It's like every time BNL showed even just a little glimmer of life, they had a shooter there to stamp it out with a bunch of different kids making plays. Lily Bischoff was kind of the common thread through them all. On the other side, Franklin, that sectional championship game, man, that was a wake up call. And talking to them, and they're pretty open about it. Like, it was an intense week of practices. And when we mentioned Danny, the tweet that Josh shared with us, with the 3 of us, from his conversation with Mike Armstrong, but just intense. They get it. It's a sign of a veteran team that knows what they're doing. They know how to win this time of year. And I think most importantly of all is that they trust and care for each other enough that they can call each other out. They can, kick each other in the butt when they need to and do those sorts of things that only comes with time and only comes with building those relationships, So that's really important. And Center Grove seems to have the same thing. So fascinating matchup. I'm really excited to see how that one plays out.
Funny story real quick to send us out. So we're at, because you were saying about calling each other out. So we are in the semi-state. We're playing at Jasper against Mooresville. We're up 11, okay, with like 4 minutes to go. All we're doing is we're just kind of running our stuff. And then all of a sudden, a couple turnovers, Mooresville hits some shots. All of a sudden, it's like a 4-point game. Okay, Scarlett, I think, is a sophomore at this point, Scarlett Kimbrell. I call a timeout. We come over, and before I can even, get to the team and start going over what we're going to do, she just rips everyone a new one. And then we come out, score, get a stop, and then things kind of got back in. And that was as a sophomore. So I think, like you were saying, those things, holding each other accountable, getting on each other when they need to. They've been at these wars year after year. It's going to be a great matchup.
Good stuff. A few programming notes before we get out of here at the 90-minute mark on the nose. We're going to have a coaches roundtable tomorrow, Thursday afternoon. It's going to post probably around 7:30. It's going to be the 4 of us. We're going to be joined by Cathedral coach Lisa Finn, Lawrence North coach Stephen Thomas, Evansville North coach Tyler Choate, and then from Penn, Christy Ehrlich are going to join us. We're going to cover a variety of topics, going to preview some semi-state matchups, because a lot of these coaches, there's been so much overlap between 4A and 3A with some of these teams. So it'll be cool getting that opposing coach's point of view on some of these games. And then, like I've been mentioning throughout the show, full interviews with Josh Douglas, Jared Rehmel, and Kaley May are going to be available on the YouTube channel for everybody to check out. I highly recommend it. They're all about 10 to 13 minutes a piece. So some really good insights, some really fun stories too with everybody. Everybody kind of had their own different, unique fun story that Danny and I were able to tap into. So that was really fun. Highly recommend it. But that's all I got. We'll also be back with predictions because I'm a glutton for punishment and I like company. So I invite everybody back for predictions again.
And I'll make a guarantee. One of those 4 coaches is actually going to disagree with something that Save says.
Nice. Looking forward to
happen. It's going to happen. All right. For Courtney Delks, Danny Riego, Josh Sabol, my name is Brian Haenchen. You've been watching the Scores Table. We thank you all so much for watching, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.